In early 2026, the United States, Israel, and Iran engaged in a military conflict that crippled global energy markets and abruptly froze international shipping lanes. Yet 40 years prior, during the brutal Iran-Iraq War, Israel covertly sold hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons to the newly formed Islamic Republic to help it survive. To understand how a pragmatic, secret alliance between these nations dissolved into an unrestrained, devastating war, we have to look at the architecture of the Middle East. For decades, a complex system of geographic and diplomatic shields kept these adversaries from fighting head-on. By 2026, those shields had systematically collapsed. The breakdown begins in 1953, when the CIA and MI6 orchestrated a coup to overthrow Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, after he moved to nationalize the country's oil industry. The operation restored the pro-Western Shah to power, but the resulting decades of repression fueled a massive backlash. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution swept the country, culminating in revolutionaries storming the U.S. Embassy and holding 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. That 1953 intervention became a permanent fixture in Iranian political memory. It cemented a deep suspicion of American and Western intentions that would dictate Iran's defensive military strategy for the next 70 years. Following the 1979 revolution, Iran's new leadership recognized a stark reality. Their conventional military could not survive a direct head-to-head war with the United States or Israel. They needed a way to project power from a distance. They developed a strategy of delegated deterrence, building what they called the Axis of Resistance, a coalition of allied armed groups, including Hezbollah and Hamas, funded and equipped by Tehran. While proxies provided physical distance, a different kind of threat emerged in the early 2000s, when the discovery of undeclared Iranian nuclear facilities sparked international alarm over a potential weapons program. To prevent a preemptive military strike, an international coalition negotiated the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This agreement served as a diplomatic buffer, placing strict, verified limits on Iran's nuclear enrichment in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. That diplomatic shield cracked in 2018 when the United States unilaterally withdrew from the agreement. Washington reinstated a campaign of maximum pressure, levying severe economic sanctions aimed at crippling the Iranian economy. With the agreement voided and sanctions restored, Iran gradually abandoned the nuclear limits. The diplomatic guardrails vanished, accelerating a tense cycle of nuclear advancement and military posturing. Then, the October 7, 2023 attacks by Hamas ignited a cascading two-year war across the region. Over the ensuing months, intensive Israeli military campaigns systematically dismantled the militant infrastructure in Gaza and southern Lebanon, severely degrading both Hamas and Hezbollah. As the outer rings of the Axis of Resistance faded, Iran lost its geographic distance. With its proxy fighters depleted and weapons caches destroyed, the physical distance between Tehran and its adversaries evaporated. By late 2025, the carefully constructed defensive architecture was gone. Without proxies to absorb the blows or treaties to manage the nuclear dispute, nothing remained to stop a direct state-on-state confrontation. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive, coordinated air campaign that penetrated deep into Iranian airspace, targeting key missile facilities and critical nuclear infrastructure. But the operation went further than infrastructure. Precision strikes hit a residential compound in Tehran, successfully assassinating Iran's sitting supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. The assassination of a sitting head of state immediately fractured the international community. Legal scholars and UN officials sharply debated whether the preemptive strike was a lawful act of self-defense against an imminent nuclear threat, or a severe violation of the UN Charter. Inside Iran, the sudden power vacuum triggered an irregular succession process, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps quickly installing Khamenei's son, Mossadegh, to lead the country amidst the chaos. By eliminating the supreme leader, the attacking nations crossed a long-standing normative boundary in modern statecraft. The decades-long shadow war was now an overt, unrestrained conflict. The military campaign carried a heavy civilian cost. The strikes resulted in thousands of casualties, including a widely condemned incident where outdated targeting intelligence led to the destruction of a girls' primary school in Minab. This chart tracks the value of the Iranian rial against the US dollar. You can see how the compounded pressure of war costs and reinstated United Nations sanctions drove the currency from 32,000 in 2015 down to a catastrophic 1.5 million in early 2026. As purchasing power vanished, desperate citizens poured into the streets across all 31 Iranian provinces. The government responded to this economic uprising with an absolute internet blackout, live fire, and tens of thousands of mass detentions. While the global powers maneuvered for geopolitical advantage, the actual cost was extracted from ordinary civilians who found themselves trapped between external bombardment and internal violent repression. In retaliation for the strikes, Iran leveraged its remaining asymmetric capabilities, deploying drones, missiles, and small boats to make the Strait of Hormuz completely impassable for commercial shipping. That narrow maritime passage was the transit route for roughly 1/5 of global seaborne oil trade and 20% of its liquefied natural gas. The flow of global energy was abruptly severed. Physical crude oil prices spiked to nearly $150 a barrel. The disruption rippled outward, driving up global inflation, crippling petrochemical production in Asia, and threatening international food security as fertilizer inputs became stranded. The sheer economic devastation forced the warring parties to the table, resulting in a fragile memorandum of understanding in June 2026. The agreement paused the immediate violence, but left the central disputes over Iran's nuclear capabilities entirely unresolved. The unwritten rules that managed the Middle East for over 40 years have been dismantled. Without diplomatic agreements or proxy networks to contain the friction, the entire globe is now directly exposed to the economic and security costs whenever this conflict erupts.